Hey, Britton.
Hello, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Well, thanks.
Hey, Amanda, good evening.
Hey, how are you?
Doing good. How are you doing?
I'm all right. It's busy.
Yeah. We are excited to share the design guidelines update, and Britton has put a lot of effort and energy into making a great presentation tonight. And so I asked if she could focus on that for you guys and if I could help take the signage request forward. So I'll be presenting tonight. Just want to give you an update on that change.
Okay. Thanks.
Hey, Mr. McIntosh, how are you, sir?
I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Can hear you just fine. Just want to make sure you're comfortable with the video and audio if you need it for tonight, if you want to address the commission or anything.
Yeah, if they need me, I'm here. That's
Okay, great. And thanks for sharing the photos. I've got those also up if you need me to present them to the commission.
okay.
So Nat and Britton, I also did see that we're doing updates before the presentation. Was that strategic?
Yes, we'll yeah, we kind of flipped the agenda for tonight to get the positions identified and then give an update, and then I think the next part of the agenda is sorry, just lost it on my screen. Yeah, we'll do the presentation last. So as you mentioned, it's nomination of the chair and vice chair, setting the date and time, and then a discussion on the bylaws, which Britton will help lead. Sophia's going to be listening tonight, but I think Britton's going to lead the discussion on the bylaws.
Okay, perfect. Hey, Catherine, how are you?
I'm good, Amanda. How are you?
I'm good.
Hi, Nat. Hi, Britton.
Hello, good evening.
Hello.
Hey, Michael. Hi, Steve.
How's everybody doing?
Good, how are you?
Ready for Christmas?
Hey, Terry. Hey, Robert.
Hi.
Hello.
Nat, you doing well?
Generally staying out of trouble. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Oh, that's disappointing.
It's not from a lack of trying, just I've not been successful lately.
You do a wonderful job.
Thank you, sir. Thanks for being here tonight.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Hey, Carolee, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Hi, Dr. Haley. Welcome to the Harc meeting. How are you tonight? You're muted.
I sure am. I'm great. How are you doing, Amanda?
Good.
Thanks.
Nat, do we, or Myrna, do we anticipate anybody being gone this evening? It looks like Faustine's the only one I'm,
Yes, she's the only one that I don't see logged on. Everyone, Pam is, but she's not on yet either.
okay, Myrna, I'm sorry, if that was you talking, I didn't get any of that.
Can you hear me a little better?
Mm,
How about now?
no, okay. Myrna, is she trying again, we think, Nat?
Yes, so it sounds like we're missing Faustine and Pam.
Okay,
tonight.
they're absent tonight, right? Okay,
Mhm.
okay. Okay, all right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. For the guests that we have on the line tonight, we do have some Harc business that we need to do before we get to our agenda items. So if you'll just hang with us, we'll move through this as quickly as possible to get to those items so that you don't have to listen to all of that. But we're gonna start with some Harc business first. So, okay, good evening. I'm Amanda Parr and I'm the chair of the Historic and Architectural Review Commission. The time is 6:02 p.m. and I would like to welcome everyone to our meeting of the City of Georgetown Historic and Architectural Review Commission. The Historic and Architectural Review Commission, appointed by the mayor and city council, is responsible for hearing and taking final action on applications for certificates of appropriateness based upon the city council adopted downtown and old town design guidelines and the Unified Development Code. This virtual meeting format is different from the regular meetings at City Hall, but we will still follow a similar meeting format. We will consider the cases scheduled for this meeting individually as follows. Staff will make a presentation of the case, and then I will give the commissioners an opportunity to ask questions to staff. After the staff presentation, the applicant or their representative will have up to 10 minutes to present or provide comments on their project if they so choose, followed by questions from the commissioners. Once staff and the applicant have addressed questions from the commissioners, we will open the meeting for the public hearing. If you would like to provide comments on the agenda item, please wait until I open the public hearing. When I open the public hearing, I will ask if anyone would like to speak. And if you would, please unmute yourself and state your name. Once we have the name of everyone who would like to speak, I will call the names in order. When your name is called, you will have up to 3 minutes. A speaker may allot their time to another speaker for a maximum of 6 minutes. If you wish to allot your time to another speaker, please indicate so when I open the public hearing. Please remember that all comments and questions must be addressed to the commission, and please be patient while we organize the speakers during the public hearing portion. You also have the opportunity to provide comments through the Q&A section of the live meeting located on the right-hand side of your screen. Please provide your full name and address for the record, and your comment will be read by staff. After everyone who is asked to speak has spoken, I will close the public hearing and provide a few minutes of rebuttal time to the applicant if they so choose. Following this set of questions, I will ask the commissioners for a motion and a second, followed by deliberation and any additional questions to staff or to the applicant. Then I will call for a vote on the motion. If the applicant or a member of the public has questions or concerns following a vote on an agenda item, please communicate those to the recording secretary outside of this meeting so that staff can follow up with you. You can provide your contact information through the Q&A section and request follow-up. You can call the planning department at 512-930-3575, or you can email historic@georgetown.org. I would like to remind everyone to please state your name before you make any public comments. That includes staff, commissioners, applicants, and members of the public who speak during the public comment portion of the meeting. If you are a member of the public, please provide your address. The first item on the agenda is okay, so we have item C, which is nomination and selection of a vice chair and secretary for the 2021-2022 year. Okay, so do I have any nominations for a vice chair?
she's not here, I'll nominate Faustine.
Okay, thank you, Michael. We have a nomination for Faustine Curry to become vice chair. Do I have a second?
Yes, I'll second it, Catherine.
Okay, thank you. So let's take a vote. I have a motion by Commissioner Walton and a second by Commissioner Morales. Commissioner Parr, approve. Commissioner Morales,
Approve.
Commissioner Walton,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnston,
Approve.
Commissioner Hyde,
Approve.
and Commissioner Nunn.
Approve.
Okay, that motion carries. Thank you. Okay, so do I have a nomination for our secretary for the year 2021, 2022?
Unless she doesn't want to do it, I'll nominate Commissioner Hyde. It's Catherine Morales speaking.
Okay. So I have a motion to nominate Commissioner Hyde. Do I have a second?
I'll second that. Steve Johnston.
All right, we have a motion to nominate Commissioner Hyde for our secretary. Motion by Commissioner Morales, second by Commissioner Johnston. Let's take a vote. Commissioner Parr, approve. Commissioner Morales,
Approve.
Commissioner Walton,
Proof.
Commissioner Johnston,
Approve.
Commissioner Hyde,
Approve.
and Commissioner Nunn.
Approve.
Okay, thank you very much. That motion carries. Okay, our next agenda item, let me get back, is item D, discussion and possible action to approve a meeting time, date, and place for the 2021-2022 year. Staff, do you all want to discuss this or thoughts or?
Well, there is a viewpoint of this that could be, this is kind of reconfirming your current meeting time and date. We do definitely not want to conflict with City Council and Planning and Zoning Commission meetings. It's one of the reasons this meeting is scheduled for second and fourth Thursdays at 6 p.m. It gives an opportunity to not overlap meetings that multiple people might need to be at, et cetera, et cetera. So if the commission did see a need to change their meeting date and time, let's please discuss that. Staff is here to support that discussion, or if y'all would just like to confirm your current meeting date and time, which is second and fourth Thursdays of the month at 6 p.m., you can also do that.
Okay, thank you, Britton. Does anyone have any comments on leaving our meeting on the second and fourth Thursdays of the month at 6 p.m.? The location is City Hall. Whenever the city makes the decision that we'll move back to City Hall, at this point, we'll still remain by Zoom. Does anyone have any issues with that?
No.
Okay,
No
and I'll entertain a motion.
I make a move that we leave our meeting date and time and place as it is currently.
Okay, thank you. I have a motion by Commissioner Morales. Do I have a second?
I'll second. Terry Hyde.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion to leave our meetings on the second and fourth Thursdays at 6 p.m. for the Historic and Architectural Review Commission. Let's take a vote. Commissioner Parr, approve. Commissioner Morales,
Approve.
Commissioner Walton,
Proof.
Commissioner Johnston,
Approve.
Commissioner Hyde,
Approve.
and Commissioner Nunn.
Approve.
Okay, thank you. That motion carries. Okay, and now we have item E, consideration and possible action to appoint a new member to the Historic and Architectural Review Demolition Subcommittee. Okay, Michael, do you have a?
Yeah, can you say who's on it right now?
So currently it is myself as the chair of the commission, Commissioner Johnston. And then I think according to our bylaws, it is, what is Mark's official position, which I know is not going to be his position very much longer.
It's the building official, and then we normally see Mark Moore as the assistant building official or the building official's designee for those meetings. And so, believe it or not, the UDC does outline that the building official is part of this subcommittee along with 2 members of Harc.
Okay, Britton, I have a question about that. Is there
Yes,
a
ma'am.
reason why we couldn't add additional commissioners to the committee? I'm just wondering.
No, there's not. And so that's something that y'all could propose as a change to your bylaws. So just to recap for everybody, The city council does final approval for all of the bylaws for the boards and commissions that the council appoints. And so what we would expect to do is for any changes that y'all would want to make to your bylaws, such as changing the number of commissioners for the demolition subcommittee and or introducing an alternate member for that demolition subcommittee, if you would make that in your motion. And so, for example, the motion could look like motion to approve the bylaws with an amendment that would do X, Y, Z. Then when you make that vote, what staff will do is carry that forward to the city council as a proposed amendment to your bylaws, which council would then vote on. I believe that would take 2 votes. And so staff anticipates taking any changes that y'all would want to propose to the council at the end of May and then in June. So there's usually for a lot of things, there's a 2 meeting sequence with council. They do a first reading and then they do a second reading.
Okay. Commission, the reason why I'm asking that question is because as a member of the demo subcommittee, with just 2 Harc members, if one person is not present, I think that leaves 1 Harc member, really as the lone voice there from Harc, which I think we need a little bit more participation in the demo subcommittee, but that's my thought. Does anyone else have any other thoughts there about adding another commissioner to that?
Pre-COVID, we used to advertise when the demolition committee was meeting, and any Harc member was invited to come along if they wanted to. And I did go along on several. My only hesitancy in volunteering myself for that is I don't meet the criteria of what they're looking for as a background on the demolition subcommittee. It seems pretty specific. They want somebody who's at least more knowledgeable about construction. I may be reading that wrong, but.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Any other thoughts on that, or is there anyone who has interest in being on this committee? We typically just have a discussion. Carolee, do you have a comment?
I don't mind being an alternate, but I know I am not the most reliable to be able to pick up and go on short notice.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested, but I have the same comment as Commissioner Morales. When I look at the bylaws, I don't know, do we have a licensed architect or a structural engineer currently on this committee?
Carolee is a licensed architect, but she's not on the demo subcommittee. I'm sorry, yes, she's not on the demo subcommittee due to her schedule at Meridian. We discussed this last year, so.
Yeah.
So if I might share, what I think staff can offer is it's important to be able to hold these meetings when they're requested. And one of the constraints that we have on the demolition subcommittee meetings is that they need to be held within 30 days of the application being deemed complete. And so that can be a little bit tighter scheduling timeline than you will see for the demolition request that goes to Harc. So we want to make sure we address the application and the request promptly. So we convene the demolition subcommittee within 30 days. But because we're a certified local government, we do not bring the case to the full commission until after 60 days have passed. That gives staff more time to review and research and to kind of bring all of the possible options and the best information that we can to the commission for a decision. I think staff, especially because we do have the building official included in this role, staff is happy to support those commissioners who would like to serve on this demolition subcommittee. And so if you have a willingness and an interest in serving, I think we would happily support your being resourced the way that you need to be a successful member of that review team. Staff provides a lot of support. We also take the comments and conversation and the recommendation from that group. We write up that report and we provide that to the full commission. So a lot of it is being able to see the structure in person to the best extent that we can during COVID and review that technical information, which I think you would be surprised at the facility. Y'all have great familiarity with a lot of these issues. And so if you are willing to serve, please know that staff is happy to support that service.
Okay, thank you. And being on the committee, I concur with that. That we have plenty of staff support in these areas as well. So, but I would, again, just with people being gone, either having an alternate if Carolee would like to do that, or a third member would be great.
Well, what I was going to offer is that if that support means notifying or looking for meeting dates ahead of time, what I found previously is that dates were very short notice, and they always seem to be like on Friday mornings at 10 o'clock, which is when I have a standing executive meeting. So, I don't know if you've got 30 days, it seems like it wouldn't be that hard. But then again, I know that sometimes those things get pushed down so that you really wind up with 5 days to get it scheduled. So,
Okay. All right.
So
Go ahead, Michael.
I'll let you say what you're
So the only
gonna.
thing I was going to say is I, as chair, would be happy to remain on the demo subcommittee. I was going to ask Steve what his thoughts were about remaining on that committee, or.
Madam Chairman, I'd be happy to continue to serve, but if somebody else would like to serve, I'd be happy to step aside. I guess my background in facilities management and doing that kind of stuff, and previously being on a city council, I was picked because of my background knowledge, I think. And I'd be happy to get out of the way if somebody else wants to take part.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead, Michael.
Well, I'll just say I would like to do it. So hearing what Britton said, I'm good with that.
Okay. All right. So how do we want to handle this? Do we want to leave it at 2, or do we want to move? Do we want to entertain a bylaws change to 3 people?
I'd make a motion to have a bylaw change to allow for 3 people.
Okay.
and I would second that.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so I will entertain a motion for who is going to be on that committee. Carolee, I think I just need to know from you, do you prefer to be an alternate, or do you prefer for Michael and Steve to remain? Michael
Join, and I'll be an alternate if
Okay.
you need me.
Okay. All right. So is that motion clear?
Madam Chair, so, because I do want to be clear, so if for the purposes of today's meeting and appointing the members that will serve on the demolition subcommittee for the upcoming year, we want to appoint 2 people. I think we can certainly go ahead and identify an alternate so that staff can make sure to contact that person as we contact for that meeting. Those meetings are publicly posted, and so we do have an opportunity for people to attend that meeting if they're interested. Please don't feel like you're excluded. But for the purposes of today, I think we want to do 2 things here. I think we want to appoint and identify those members who will serve on that role. And then I think we also, it sounds like, want to propose an amendment to the bylaws that would add either another person or an alternate. I think those are 2 separate motions. And so if y'all would be willing to consider voting on who serves in that role first for the upcoming year, that can be amended or adjusted later on in your meetings as needed. And then we will kind of capture bylaw amendments kind of all together, if y'all don't mind. That might help.
So you want to put the bylaw amendment in the next agenda item, or you want to do that now?
I think you can do it in the next item.
Okay.
In item F, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so do we want to make let's make a motion to appoint 2 commissioners to the demo subcommittee.
Catherine Morales making a motion to appoint Amanda Parr and Steve Johnston to the demolition subcommittee.
Seconded.
Okay, so we have a motion to appoint myself, Amanda Parr, and Steve Johnston to the demo subcommittee. And we have a second by Carolee Nunn. Okay, let's take a vote. Let me just clarify something here. Okay, so are we looking at Michael as an alternate or Carolee as an alternate? Since we just had 2 people.
So I would propose that we expand the committee to 3 and have an alternate when we decide to amend. And that way you'll have plenty of coverage for any time the demo subcommittee meets.
Okay. Is that amenable to you, Carolee?
Yeah.
Okay. Catherine, will you amend your motion, please?
So I don't think I can amend this motion. I think we have to vote on the motion that you and Steve are going to be on this current subcommittee. And then we make a different motion
You're
to
right.
amend the bylaw.
Thank
Is
you.
that right, Britton?
Sorry. Thank you. Okay. All right. So let's take a vote. Commissioner Parr, approve. Commissioner Morales,
Approve.
Commissioner Walton,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnston,
Approved.
and Commissioner Nunn,
Approve.
and Commissioner Hyde.
Approve.
Okay, that motion carries. So we're going to move on to this last agenda item here under this section. So this is item F, consideration and possible action to confirm the bylaws for the Historic and Architectural Review Commission. Nat, do you want to talk first, or do you want to do the bylaw that we just discussed?
Britain's got a good firm handle on the bylaws discussion that y'all like to have, and I think we've captured your sentiment so far on what you'd like to do with recommending the appointment of one more full commissioner and one alternate. And Britain can help lead the discussion on what other bylaw changes you might want to suggest.
So are we doing these singly, or are we going to have many things to discuss in the bylaws?
You can do them as one single motion, I think. And so what I want to recap for the commission is, so we have this change to the bylaws in terms of the demolition subcommittee composition. What staff understands is that rather than having 2 Harc members serving, you would like to have 3 Harc members serving with an alternate also to serve in the event that one of those 3 people would not be able to serve. I believe that would kind of, just to understand a little more completely, because we like to know things in case we have questions later. Does this mean that a quorum, and this does include the building official, so we have 3 Harc commissioners and the building official. Would this mean a quorum would be 3 out of those 4 members? Is that the goal, or is the goal to ensure all 4 people are present for the meeting and use the alternate as needed?
Well, my goal in making the statement was to make sure at least 2 people from Harc are at all demolition meetings, at
Okay.
least 2, no matter how many. So that doesn't speak to the quorum question. I think that has to be separate with, do you count always the 2 Harc people? And then what if somebody from the city doesn't show up? I don't know what constitutes a quorum then.
Well, staff will make sure, staff
Okay.
will make sure that staff is available. The building official does have the opportunity to appoint somebody to act in their stead, and that happens across different city responsibilities. And so
Yeah,
they
it's
can have a
not-
designee, but
it's-
I think I understand better what the goal was for that.
Yeah, it is not the intention to expand the quorum in any way.
Okay.
Yes, and since I brought this item up, I would concur with that. It's, it's to make sure we have plenty of people present, but also to have one other voice, because, demo is something that, we take very seriously. And I think the more voices, the better, if possible. So.
Thank you. So another option that I want to kind of highlight for the commission, and something that we've discussed previously, and this is that opportunity, is we had talked about, Harc is familiar with the alternate members being able to previously serve to fill all 7 seats. And then there was a determination several months ago that alternate members were only needed to serve in the event that there was not a quorum of the commissioners for a meeting. And so our alternates have had not the same opportunity to serve as maybe previously. And so one of the options that the commissioners have this evening in voting on a request to amend the bylaws is to kind of fix that requirement that alternates may serve when there are not 7 commissioners, rather than not having a quorum, if that makes sense. So a quorum for Harc is 4, And if you would like for the commissioner, we have 2 alternates. And so if you would like for the alternate commissioners to be able to serve more than when there's just not a quorum, if you would like them to be able to serve so that we have as many votes, up to 7 votes as possible. You don't have to be super technical specific in that. Staff kind of understands what was expressed to us, but this would be that opportunity in your motion to also say that you would like to have the alternates be able to serve when there are not 7 commissioners present for the meeting. Does that make sense? And if I need to recap that more, please let me know. I think most of y'all have been part of that discussion.
So Britton, I have a question about that. So, you know, in my time on Harc, it had always functioned the way that is now being brought up, that alternates filled a seat when someone was gone. Like tonight, one of our alternates would be serving in Faustine's, you know, place tonight.
Correct.
But this change due to something that occurred at P&Z is my understanding.
Correct.
And my also understanding is that council, you know, wants there to be some consistency there. So what is currently happening with P&Z? And because again, these recommendations are going to council, correct?
Correct.
So what is happening with P&Z currently? And why did we even get in this position to begin with?
So there was a vote in the Planning and Zoning Commission that in that instance, the outcome of the vote hinged on an alternate commissioner voting. And then when kind of the technical details were looked into, a determination had to be made, and the determination was, oh, the bylaws actually aren't written for this commission the way that the alternate had been serving. And so as the exact same thing was found for Harc. And so we really, you know, y'all had kind of expressed to us, hey, we would like to continue to have our alternate serve. And we said we can check that with legal and we can understand what that would look like. And so legal shared with us that if y'all would like to go basically back to the way things were, then you can make that request and just share that that's the amendment that you would like to make, and then we can carry that forward to council. I am not aware of there needing to be a perfect match between the two. That may come up in the council, but if you wanted to go that direction, certainly the first thing to do would be to make that request for an amendment, and then that can be considered. But we would have to have that request made before we would be able to carry that forward.
Okay, and then thank you. I have one other question. So whereas I think it's great that alternates participate, I also have concern about if we were to, you know, have a meeting and have a decision made that, or not have a decision made, we postpone, or, you know, we do something different and then that comes back and that alternate wasn't a part of the first conversation and decision, and then they're a part of the second conversation. How is that working?
That's a really good question. And so when alternates serve as voting commissioners, it gets treated the way that a voting commissioner would be treated. So it would effectively be the same if a regular commissioner were at one meeting and not another meeting. You still have the opportunity to vote. If there's kind of a 2-meeting kind of process of evaluating and reviewing an application, then if you were able to make one meeting but not able to make another meeting, you are still able to vote when you are a voting commissioner. And so this would be treated very similarly to maybe an absence. And so I don't know that it would create a conflict because a voting commissioner is a voting commissioner. This would really just affect when alternates are able to become voting commissioners and how many regular commissioners have to be absent before they're able to be voting commissioners, I think.
I was just wondering, does planning and zoning have any change to revert back? Or are they sticking with not allowing the alternates to serve to make up a quorum?
I don't remember planning and zoning requesting that change. I don't know that they had the same kind of question about it that Harc did. And so I do not remember them proposing that change when they had the opportunity to review their bylaws. They did that a couple of weeks ago. And so I'm just not familiar. Like I said, it doesn't mean that y'all cannot make that request just because P and Z did not. Your bylaws are your own commission bylaws, so they can be treated separately.
Thank you.
Michael, did you have a question?
Yeah, so Britton, maybe I'm slightly confused, but I look at
That's
the
okay.
bylaws, section 2.3, item B. It says alternate members shall serve as alternates with voting privileges for any absent commissioner. It doesn't mention anything about quorum. Just the way I read it is if the way that it was stated earlier, that if someone's absent, then the alternate fills that slot. Period.
And that's the way that it had been treated until legal kind of found a need to make a different determination. And so
So what you've said presented is something that is recommended to us by legal?
correct. And so we reviewed this with our legal team, the city's attorneys, and said, hey, we our commissioners have some concerns about this and would like to know what is the opportunity for us to go back to the way it had been previously treated? Is that a bylaws change? What does that look like? What would that be? And so what was shared back with us is that y'all could ask to make that change. It's not something that's currently available to you. It would need to be something that got specified. Y'all would not need to write that specifying language. Legal can do that. They can prepare that ordinance. They can prepare those documents to carry forward. Sophia has been working very closely with Sky, our city attorney, to make sure that we know what that process is. And so in bringing the bylaws to y'all to confirm today, this is that opportunity to consider whether or not you do want to indeed make that change and make that request. And so that's kind of the best of my knowledge on how, and I apologize, Commissioner Walton, because I think you joined the commission a little bit after this discussion was had. And so I don't mean to kind of leave you out of that background, but in order for us to kind of reinstate the way that we had done things previously, where alternates could serve if we had fewer than 7 regular commissioners serving, even though what you're reading in the bylaws is there, that was still something that legal said needed to be made more clear in the written bylaws so that it could be implemented in terms of who is sitting on the dais for the purposes of a vote.
Okay, so legal is saying that we should change it. They are recommending we change it to say that an alternate would only serve if it's less than a quorum.
No, currently the way that it works, kind of per our legal guidance, is that if there is less than a quorum, so if we have fewer than 4 Harc commissioners at a meeting, then an alternate can step up to be a voting commissioner up until we reach the quorum, which is 4. Harc doesn't have a supermajority vote need, and so 4 is our minimum to be able to hold a meeting. What has been discussed and kind of requested that we look into is alternates being able to serve when there are fewer than 7. So say 6 commissioners were available like tonight, the alternate that's on rotation to serve would be able to serve as a voting commissioner. So you would have 7 voting commissioners. If we only had 5 regular commissioners tonight, then both alternates would be able to serve. If we only had 4 regular commissioners tonight, both alternates would be able to serve and we would only have a total of 6 votes. The way that it works right now is that since we have 6 commissioners, neither of the alternates could serve tonight as a voting commissioner. And so one of the reasons that was expressed to staff why it might be beneficial for alternates to be able to serve when there were fewer than 7 voting commissioners in a meeting is that it encourages that participation. Y'all have absolutely fantastic attendance for Harc meetings, which we really deeply appreciate everybody's involvement and commitment to serving the community. But one of the things that was brought up is if alternates have more opportunity to serve by filling the roles that are left vacant up to 7, then it might be a better encouragement for that continued really excellent attendance at the meetings, knowing that you would have an opportunity to serve in a voting capacity.
Yeah, so the way I read the bylaws that were given to us to vote on. That's what legal is recommending, is what they say. So I would say we leave them.
So
And-
I have a question. So can I, since Brittany, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
Oh, sure.
I'm understanding we made the change based on legal's recommendation. What's written is not legal's recommendation.
Well, what's written is your bylaws currently.
Right.
And so what y'all would be, if y'all want to propose amendments tonight, you would say what you're wanting to amend the bylaws to read in the future. And so
Right,
we
I
haven't
understand
made,
that, but mid-year, legal made a change to the quorum to say that that we needed to make this change to only have a quorum. Alternates fill is only a quorum due to the P and Z decision that occurred, correct?
Yes, yeah, the legal interpretation of the bylaws as they're written is that alternates can only serve when there's a need for quorum. That was their directive to staff and to
Okay,
make
and
the
so is
board
that
decision.
still legal's recommendation?
No, legal does not have a recommendation as to how alternates perform. That's up to you and how you would like to see the board make its recommendations to council. So I think what we're asking for is if you can tell us if the commissioners should serve to make a full board, or if you want to reserve alternates to only serve when a quorum is needed. And then we can go back to legal and work on the language to make sure that we're carrying your sentiment forward to council.
Can I make a motion? It's Commissioner Morales. I make a motion that we go back to the way we used to operate. And that would be going back to the way that Michael has read it from what our current laws are. So go back to having alternates be able to fill any vacancy to make up a quorum.
Okay, so we have a motion to do that. Do we have a second?
Well, hang on.
Yeah, I
It's
have
not to
questions,
make a
frankly.
quorum. I
Yeah.
think the motion is to allow alternates to serve in any commissioner's position who is not in attendance,
Correct.
regardless of a quorum.
Yeah, revert back to our original language and the way we used to operate.
Okay, I'm going to
Okay.
second that based
Okay,
upon what
so we
I,
have
yeah.
we have a motion by Commissioner Morales, a second by Commissioner Nunn. Do we have any other comments or questions? I'm gonna ask any of y'all before I make my comment.
Could we clarify the motion, please?
Sure, I have a motion by Morales and a second by Nunn to recommend that the council allow for 3 subcommittee members and 1 alternate to the demolition subcommittee, and to allow alternates to serve in the absence of any full commissioner.
Steve, did you get that?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay, any questions or comments? Okay, I just have one comment. I think that this is a great move. I just am still confused by why legal would change this mid-year. And then now I want to be sure that we're following what legal's direction is.
I don't think they made a recommendation. I think they decided the language meant something that it didn't, or it meant something else. Is that right?
yes.
They're saying the language actually means this. We don't care what you do, but it actually means this. That was my understanding.
Yes.
Okay,
'Cause I
so,
interpreted it the same way Michael read it, which is what we
Right.
were doing before.
and
is-
that's what and that's what we want. So we're saying we want to go back to the way we used to interpret it, but we're gonna have to clarify that in the language because legal doesn't, they're not getting it.
Okay, and staff, you don't feel like that we're not making a problem that legal would not concur with? I mean,
Nope.
we're not lawyers, so I want to be sure, except for Robert. So I want to be sure that we're not,
And just, we will make sure, as long as we understand the sentiment of your motion, we will make sure that legal provides a proper review before it goes to, and before it goes to council for their decision to act upon, we'll make sure. But if we've understood you correctly, the motion is to allow any alternate to vote in the absence of any full commissioner, and we'll make sure that legal blesses that before that council action, so that council is also taking a legal action. But I believe we've captured your sentiment, and
Okay.
we'll make sure legal is good with it too.
Okay, thank you. I just want to be sure that they're good with it and that we don't get in this situation where alternates are caught off guard mid-year when changes are made unexpectedly. So, okay. All right, let's take a vote. Commissioner Parr, approve. Commissioner Morales,
Approve.
Commissioner Walton,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnston,
Approved.
Commissioner Nunn,
Approve.
and Commissioner Hyde.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That motion carries. Sorry that took longer than we expected. Okay, moving on to our next agenda item. Okay, we have item item H, which is consideration and possible action to approve the minutes from the April 8th, 2021 regular meeting of the Historic and Architectural Review Commission. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes or any edits or comments?
Madam Chairman, this is Steve. I move that we approve the minutes.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay, we have a motion to approve the minutes as written. Let's take a vote. Commissioner Parr, approve. Commissioner Morales,
Approve.
Commissioner Walton,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnston,
Approved.
Commissioner Nunn.
Abstain. I was not there.
Oh, thank you, Carolee. And Commissioner Hyde.
Approved.
Okay, thank you. That motion carries. All right, moving on to item I, public hearing and possible action on a request for a certificate of appropriateness for new signage that is inconsistent with an approved master sign plan or applicable guidelines at the property located at 701 East University Avenue, bearing the legal description 0.31 acres, being the southwest part of Block 2, Snyder Addition. Nat, I think you're doing this presentation.
I am, and I appreciate Britton for sharing and allowing me to get back in the saddle. So I will try to meet expectations of her presentation skills. So if you allow me, I will pull up the presentation. Just 1 second, please. And please let me know if you are seeing a sign for Vet Hospital 2021-12-COA.
Yep.
Great. As the chair mentioned, this is a public hearing and possible action on a request for a certificate of appropriateness for new signage that is inconsistent with an approved master sign plan or applicable guidelines for the property located at 701 East University, bearing the legal description of 0.31 acres, being the southwest part of Block 2 in the Snyder Addition. As chair mentioned, Harc has the authority to approve a signage that is inconsistent with the applicable guidelines. Staff does have the ability to approve those that do meet the guidelines. So we're presenting an application here tonight for your consideration. If you will allow me, share with you an overview of what the applicant is requesting. This is an internally illuminated monument sign for the new vet clinic. The sign consists of a concrete base and a 5x5 illuminated double-sided panel and a cabinet. Sharing with you what the design looks like in both a daytime setting and a nighttime setting here. This view is taken from the west side of the property looking east along University. To give you a sense of where this property is located, we are just east of the Hammerlin Center. The sign is located in the front yard of the structure, which fronts University. We have some imagery from a street view perspective, which we try and give you. Street view was last captured in 2011 looking directly on the property, but we do have some updated views to give you a sense of context, which are more current views. So this is east of the property, looking back west along University, and the subject property where the sign is located is in the background. There are examples of other internally illuminated panel signs in the area. To give you a sense of context, this is on the south side of University, south of the property, both for Gus's Drug as well as the retail center south of the property. As is required, staff reviewed the approval criteria in the Unified Development Code under section 3.13. The application was sufficient enough for us to be able to proceed with the review. We did find that the sign did not comply with the standards of the code. In terms of those for the Secretary of the Interior standards, the application generally complies. We did find that for UDC criteria number 4, there was a partially complies. The sign has an aluminum cabinet, the part of the sign that creates the sides around the illuminated panels, but the sign faces are acrylic or plastic, which is a type, as I mentioned, of plastic. There are signs with similar materials and the illuminated panel style along East University Avenue within the Old Town Overlay District, and the sign is consistent with the period of significance of the structure, meaning the age in which the structure has its significance. And it is auto-oriented in the front yard as the design guidelines recommend. Using a illumination similar to those panels can be seen in the surrounding area. It's a small scale commercial node of Old Town, which developed according to its time period. However, the design guidelines recommend sign styles and materials that are externally illuminated or that illuminate from only within the sign, that only illuminate the letters, not the entire sign face. We did find that the criteria for the code in which it does not comply is that the entire 5x5 sign is illuminated in the monument, which is not consistent with the guidelines. In terms of, I mentioned with UDC criteria number 7, there are examples of signs in the area. So in terms of the overall character and in terms of the period of significance in which this building was developed, and the sign is somewhat similar in character in terms of the monument and the full illumination of the panel. As I mentioned, in terms of a master sign, this is not required to have a master sign plan. And we find that it does partially comply given the surrounding context. So as was required by the UDC, we did 2 signs were posted on the property, and staff has not received any comments in favor or opposed to the request. In reviewing the UDC criteria in terms of the partially complies and does not comply, staff does recommend disapproval of the request, as is granted the authority by the UDC. Harc does have some motions to consider for this application. The commission can approve as presented by the applicant. The commission can deny as presented, approve with conditions, or postpone their decision making. As I mentioned, this is a public hearing, and the applicant is present here this evening should the commission have any questions for them. And there are instructions on how the public can participate as part of the agenda item. With that, Madam Chair, I welcome any questions you may have or of the applicant.
Okay, thank you, Nat. Lee or Dr. Haley, y'all are with us tonight. Is there anything you'd like to add to this presentation or any comment?
Well, yes, I would. I think there are several points that need to be brought up about this. And the first being that the only reason this sign got installed was because of a mistake. Applications were turned in last fall, and due to a series of events, they didn't get processed. And that's my fault, because I should have followed up with staff. Unfortunately, I turned it over to the sign company. They had a change of staff, and the next thing I knew, the sign was manufactured, and I thought it had been approved. Because we weren't having normal meetings, I didn't attend or even think about it. But again, that's my fault, and that is what it is. I instructed the sign company to not manufacture a sign until approval had been granted by the city. And when they manufactured it and told us it was ready to go, I thought that everything had been approved. So I apologize for that because that was my responsibility. But as to the sign design, its appropriateness, I think if we look close into what Secretary of Interior considers appropriate, we'll find that those standards are not applicable to a mid-century modern building. We've got two of these in Georgetown. This one and the former Wesleyan, which is now the Georgetonian down the street. These buildings do not fit into what we consider our normal architectural standards here in Old Town. So to try to apply sign standards that have been adopted for that purpose to a mid-century building is really inappropriate. The sign that we designed and the sign that ultimately got installed is appropriate for this building. And I just think that to do anything else, any other type of design that we looked at, there's only really a couple that are appropriate for a building of this type. This is a minimalist building, and it needs a simple minimalist sign. And that's what was designed and erected. And as to its appropriateness, there were a couple of examples that staff showed. Those are all non-compliant. They're backlit and double-faced and actually on a pole, which I don't think we can do anymore. We presented, I think, 4 or 5 others that are in the area that are backlit, and I dropped those off with staff this morning. In addition to that, there's 5 other signs along the university that are outside of the Old Town overlay that are also backlit and either pole signs or monument signs. And I don't know if we can show those, but there are multiple examples that we provided. These items that have been referenced about a partially backlit sign, I've seen that before in the sign ordinance, but other than a information sign or a sign such as just went up on the screen, you see they've got a what we now term a programmable sign where they can change the lettering. That type of application is appropriate for backlit and non-backlit. But other than that, I don't even know what the definition is trying to outline when it talks about a partially backlit sign on a small scale. You just end up with something that looked terrible. So I don't know how that got into the ordinance, but as a sideline, I suggest y'all might want to review that again, because other than this type of sign, it's really not applicable. Anyway, that being said, I think this is an absolute perfect fit for this building. It's not overwhelming. The buildings that we have next door and the administration building at GISD, former Georgetown High, and those 2 buildings are well lit. They light up both blocks, and the lights across the street at the Wag-A-Bag and the other stores do the same thing. This isn't overwhelming, and we've done this elsewhere. I think we've got a bright sign at the Children's Theater downtown next to residents. So we don't have a problem with precedent. We don't have a problem with design. I think it's a good fit, and I hope that you guys will approve it.
Thank you, Lee. I appreciate your comments. Dr. Haley, do you want to add anything?
Yes, hi, thank you. No, I just wanted to reiterate, Lee's comments that, we didn't intentionally, go about to do anything incorrectly. We really did think that everything had been approved and whatnot. And, as far as my goals, I just wanted to have, a simple sign that would serve the purpose of letting the community know, where we were at, so that if they are needing to find us, with their sick or injured pet, they could do so without it being, too flashy, too crazy of a design, to keep in with the community for sure. The red poppy, in it, the picket fence, on it, all of those were very calculated to be consistent with Georgetown, with Old Town itself. And so that's really, where my mind was with it. And I agree with Lee, there are a lot of other, lit signs that are up on poles and much bigger than what we've got, I think. So I do think the precedent is there, but regardless, I appreciate y'all's time and your consideration, and I hope you are in agreement that it can stay. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Haley. Okay, what questions or comments do we have from the commission before this is a public hearing, so I'll need to open the public hearing. Do you have any questions or comments right now?
Madam Chairman, this is Steve. Could we ask the staff specifically what is not meeting the standard or what is an exception?
Sure. There are kind of two big components. One is that the entire face of the sign is lit. And so we see other examples in the design guidelines call for just illuminating the letters. In this instance, the letters and the sign panel, the entire 5x5 is illuminated. And then the second is that the design guidelines call for a wood or metal material for the sign face, and this material is an acrylic, which is a plastic, which the guidelines recommend avoiding. So there's kind of two main components. One is that the entire face of the sign panel is illuminated, and the second is that the material which the sign is constructed.
Thank you.
Nat, can you go back to a photo of the sign and not this slide? Okay.
Are you seeing that? Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or comments at this point?
I just want to clarify, the size of the overall sign is in accordance. It's just the lighting. And so a partial lit sign would just have the lettering and the picture lit more kind of, is that what you're?
Yes. So the lettering of the sign would be illuminated.
Okay. And so like the white background would not be kind of?
Correct.
Okay.
And I guess I'd like to clarify that we have not had, I mean, this is on University, a big busy street. We haven't had any neighbors complain that the light is bothersome.
Okay.
I have not received any complaints specific to this sign. I don't know if Britain has, but we didn't get any letters of this, any letters in favor or in opposition.
Okay. All right.
Okay. Thanks very much. Michael?
Yeah, so Nat, I apologize, but I'm confused by your comments as far as answering the question about what does not comply. When I look through the report, there are two items that say does not comply. One is the illumination and the other is the height. You mentioned something about the materials and maybe the illumination, but you didn't mention the height. And really my question is how tall is that pad it's sitting on? Like how far out of the height recommendation is it? And maybe the applicant can better answer that.
To answer your question, the sign panel is on a concrete base. I don't have the specific height. I can pull that up in the height of the concrete base, but the panel itself is a 5x5, giving it a 25 square feet surface, and the Unified Development Code allows for 48. So it's in compliance size-wise. It is meant to be set back 5 feet from the property line. It does appear to meet that requirement. And the signs themselves in total are limited to 5 feet in height. I can see if I can pull up the specifications real quick.
So I'm just reading the report, so maybe the applicant can answer. The only question I have is how tall is the base?
I think the base is about 5 or 6 inches tall, but that has been mounded since it was originally installed. And so it actually meets all the standards on height. It's supposed to be 5 feet from the ground level, and I believe it is now. There's landscaping and whatnot that's going on around that. So it was meant to come up flush with the base. And that's typical for these types of signs. We typically landscape around them. So the finished grade, it'll be the correct height.
Okay, I did have one other question, if I can ask it.
Go ahead.
The recommendation that's made to us is to deny or disapprove this. What does that mean? If we were to do that, and what does that actually mean? They have to pull the sign down?
It means that they would not be in compliance, and they would have completed construction without a permit, and then they would need to remediate that. That means that they would reapply for a new permit, and whether or not that design met the criteria and could be approved by staff. So yes, so we would work with the applicant to try and bring them in compliance with our Unified Development Code, which is both a subdivision and a zoning code, and it also makes sure that they're in compliance with the building permits in our code for those. So we'd work with the applicant to bring them in compliance. So that might be a redesign of the sign. And we have our building official with whom we work, and we would want to work with the applicant to help them understand what the proper permitting procedure is and how to design the sign that would meet the code. And we could work with the applicant on a time frame to get that done.
Okay, any other questions or comments right now? Okay, so what I'd like to do is go ahead and open the public hearing to make sure that we don't have anyone else who'd like to speak on this item, and then we can have additional discussion. So I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Do we have anyone signed up to speak on this item or any chat comments?
We did have one person in the audience raise their hand. I don't know if they still wanted to address the commission. Lawrence, are you there? Did you still want to speak?
Lawrence, if you're here, I see you have your hand raised. Do you want to say anything?
Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so
Lawrence, will
Well-
you say your name and address for me, please?
sure, it's Lawrence Romero, 601 South Elm. While the mistake was made, I do believe that it's the veterinary clinic intent to keep that sign in good repair, and I think that it's not overstated, and I think that it would be okay to keep that sign there. I do see the other signs that are on 29, and some of them are in disrepair and they're old. I do think that they should be allowed to keep their sign. I know that it's not within the guidelines, but I think an exception should be made at this point. I do think that it was just a mistake that was made, but I do think that with the style of a building that of that type, I think that it's nice, and I think that I think that the commission should really think about approving it and leaving it the way that it is. But I know that you have to do what you have to do, but I would be in favor of just leaving it and letting it go with the way that it is. But it's up to you guys, but I would be in favor of just leaving it the way it is. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Lawrence. Appreciate your comments. Okay. Anyone else signed up to speak or any other comments from the public?
Not seeing anybody else in the chat and don't see any more hand raised.
Okay, great. So not seeing anyone else, we will close the public hearing. I did want to let all of our, there she is, that Faustine has joined us, and so she will be voting on this item as well. She's been listening, just needed to let her in the meeting. Okay, so I have a couple questions. This may be for the applicant, it may be for Britton. With the illumination, are there any, ways to fix the sign and get a little bit more into compliance without having to start over? I'm trying to be respectful of the applicant, but also respect our guidelines. Are there any options for different lighting of this current option?
Britton Bostick. And so, Chair, I think based on the way that sign is constructed, so it's basically a metal frame that has lights on the inside, and then you have these translucent panels that let the light through. Now, if you could go back to the slide, there you go, that shows it at night. So that shows basically there are lights inside that hollow box that's been constructed. So it probably would be possible to change the panels out. It probably would be possible to make some adjustments. That would need at least a partial replacement of some of the sign elements. And so what, in staff's evaluation, we look at the approval criteria, we look at technical specs, we look at all of that, and we bring our recommendation and analysis to the commissioners to consider as their own decision. And so where staff is recommending disapproval, it's based on a few technical issues, and it's based on the guidance in our design guidelines that even though we have those full panel signs existing in our old town, our design guidelines, which were implemented after many of these signs were constructed, kind of focuses away from this particular type of sign, although monument signs are allowed. So a monument sign being a freestanding sign mounted directly to the ground, and you'll see them at a lot of places around town. So what the commission has the opportunity to do, and I think what you've seen the case for made here, is to balance that with the context. Because if you look at staff's analysis, we did find in some cases the sign did not comply with the applicable requirements, or it partially complied, but it also did comply with some of the requirements. It is a sign type that would have been more typical of this building's period of significance as one of those later kind of mid-century. This is not a Victorian structure. It was constructed in the automobile era and kind of makes sense in that regard. And so we can certainly work with the applicant on other options if that's needed to kind of further share what next steps could look like. If the commissioners decide not to approve the sign, the applicant would also have the opportunity to appeal that decision to the city council if they chose. So that's another possible step in the process. What we wanted to do is share our best analysis based on the current guidance, and also share where there was compliance, which there are places where it does. And then we provided some of that contextual images and information in the staff presentation, just to share that it is fair to say we do see a similar type of sign, not only very close to this property, but on other properties along University Avenue. So we're happy to answer any other questions that we can as y'all work through preparing that motion.
Okay, thank you, Britton.
Yes,
yeah, I mean, I do feel like I concur with Carolee that where this sign is located and the context with the building seems appropriate. The lighting, we maybe could have made some changes there had had this, been approved before installed. But I do think from a location standpoint and context, it does seem appropriate in some ways. So, but that's my comment. Any other comments or questions this evening before I will entertain a motion?
I would ag-
Commissioner Morales, I have a question about whether or not the applicants are willing to see if the sign can be changed to become more compliant.
Well, if you made changes to this sign, you basically are going to you've got two options. You can throw the face away and start over. And what you're going to end up with, if you do a solid surface sign, is going to be something that isn't really appropriate for the building. The other thing you can do is turn off the internal lights and light it exteriorly, which again is not really appropriate. That's appropriate for a different type of building. So there aren't really a lot of options. You can either start over, which will be very expensive, and frankly, I think is wrong. I mean, I don't know how strongly I need to stress that this sign is appropriate for this building. I mean, it really, really is, and it really is attractive, and it really sets off the building as a whole. So I think you've got two options. You throw the panels away and start over. And I'm not going to go down quietly about that because I think it's wrong. And I would push for this no matter what, whether it was a staff recommendation in a normal course or where we are now. And turning off the internal lights solves part of the problem, but I don't think it really changes much. I don't think you accomplish much with it, but you'll get rid of the internal lighting aspect. Again, I'll say this for a second time. This idea of lighting letters and whatnot, I don't know how you do it. I'd love to see an example of a sign that's a mid-century correct that has letters that are illuminated. I mean, the only way to do that is a reverse channel or a channel letter. And those things are bulky and unattractive and don't belong on berms. We've just got a different set of rules that we use when we're building signs in Old Town. And I've done as much as anybody here. I understand that we don't want a modern backlit sign in front of a turn of the century building, but that's not what we have here. So they're all alternatives. None of them are really good. And I just would really encourage y'all to approve this. It's not something that's going to take away from our neighborhood. I live around the corner. I don't have a problem with this. I wouldn't have put it up if I did. I've lived across the street. I've lived in this neighborhood for 25 years. We don't do things that aren't attractive. This is a great little sign and a great little building. And if it hadn't been for Dr. Haley's patience and her ability to see what I saw, this building would not look like it does. And it's even going to get better. We're working on the final finishes on the brick. But the sign fits the building. It really does. I'm sorry that staff doesn't agree, but I don't agree with them in this matter. Just sometimes, reasonable people cannot see eye to eye, but I strongly think this is the appropriate signage for this building.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Catherine, does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
Well, Amanda, this is Carolee Nunn. I would agree that this sign is appropriate for the building. And, not everything is Victorian in Old Town or of that era. Things are of different eras, and this seems to work with what's there, but also to work on the leading edge of improvements. So I don't think, I mean, I don't see it as retrograde either. Maybe it's our guidelines that need some updating to address the various kinds of buildings that are there. And I know we have approved backlit signs that had other residential areas right there, but it was deemed important, whereas this doesn't even have residential right there. So I think it looks great.
Okay, thank you, Carolee. Okay, any other comments? If not, I will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the sign as installed.
Okay,
I'll
do I have a
second
second on that
Madam
motion?
Chairman, this is Steve. I second that motion. This is a very nice sign, very professional. I think it's a very professional addition to that building.
Okay, thank you, Steve. Okay, so we have a motion to approve the sign as constructed. We have a motion by Commissioner Nunn and a second by Commissioner Johnston. Let's take a vote. Commissioner Parr, approve. Commissioner Johnston,
Approved.
Commissioner Nunn,
Approve.
Commissioner Morales,
No,
Commissioner Walton,
Approve.
Commissioner Hyde,
Approve.
and Commissioner Curry.
Approve.
Okay, so that motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lee and Dr. Haley, for being here. And we'll look forward to seeing the rest of the building completed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on. Okay, so we now have item J, which is updates, commissioner questions and comments. Nat?
Thank you. The only update to share with you, I think Britton already covered, which is that the city council will consider the updates to the bylaws at their May meeting and then ratify those in their June meeting. So we'll carry on your request through legal and then on to the council. So that was the only update beyond what Britton is going to share with you in the design guidelines update, which signs are a big part of. So looking forward to that. And then also, just for those who are following along at home, we have signed the contract for the 2 small area plans for the San Jose and the TRG neighborhood. And we have solidified the meeting dates for the first steering committee. So the San Jose has 12 steering committee members, and we'll be meeting with them May 3rd. And then the TRG neighborhood has 9, and they will be meeting on Tuesday, May the 4th. And so we look forward to getting that process started with those 2 neighborhoods.
Thank you, Nat. Can you remind me the name of the consulting firm that's doing those area plans?
Sure. It's APD out of Atlanta, Georgia.
PD? APD?
APD, Alpha Papa Delta, as we would say in the Army.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so our next agenda item then is item K, which is presentation and discussion of the downtown and Old Town design guidelines update with a preview of the proposed changes and presentation of next steps and timeline for the project. Britton.
Good evening again, everyone. We are really, really close. We are almost there. You are about to see the proposed update to the design guidelines. It's coming imminently. And so because of the way that things are timing out, we wanted to take this opportunity to share what you can expect to see ahead of getting the actual document itself. And so I'm going to walk through what y'all can expect to see in terms of the document. Also, what the next steps in this process look like. We don't recommend design guideline update very often as Harc commissioners. And so I just wanted to make sure y'all were clear on things like what the public engagement looks like, what the council adoption process looks like, what your recommendation timeline looks like, especially because I know y'all can get questions from the community saying, hey, how do I get involved? What's going on? And that way y'all have that background information. And then we are going to follow up with an email next week, kind of with more depth, more detail in the attached document. So don't worry, there's lots more to come. But tonight we want to cover just where we are in the project so far, how we got here, and then I want to cover three key things. Changes to the format, how the document looks, changes to the content, what the document includes, one of the things I'm most excited about, and then changes to the requirements, those criteria for approval that we use. You see a lot of numbers and bullet points in the staff reports. That's what I'm talking about. What else remains in the project timeline, the stakeholder engagement that we're scheduled to have, and then also that adoption process. Ann McGlone with Post Oak Preservation Solutions has joined our meeting tonight, so we really appreciate Ann kind of hanging in there. Ann should be available to answer any questions if y'all have questions specific for our consultant tonight. And so just to recap what we've done so far, council gave some direction about updates that they wanted to see: commercial, residential infill, demolition, relocation, in-kind material, signage. So we took that. The December open house, we got some public feedback on what it looked like to protect our historic districts. We also had a meeting with y'all where Post Oak Preservation Solutions had a good chat with y'all, got your feedback. They've been kind of presenting kind of the big picture of what we're trying to achieve. They got familiar with Georgetown, understood y'all's concerns a bit better, especially kind of using instances where you wanted to see some improvements. What can we do that would help us to get the outcomes that we're looking for? We've taken that information in. We also had focus groups, including property owners, business owners, developers, design professionals, contractors, and city staff, not just planning staff, but other city staff. And the Main Street Advisory Board was also one of our stakeholder groups. So after taking a lot of that feedback, a lot of that input, understanding what was working well, what wasn't working as successfully, what needed to be updated, we're so close. We're about to have that document for you. One of the things I wanted to make sure we covered, because not all of our commissioners live in historic districts, is that we just sent out our annual Preservation Month letter. And so if you didn't get a copy and you want a copy, please let us know so we can send that to you. We can email it to you or we can send you a letter, but every month we send out a letter to property owners in our downtown and Old Town overlay districts, and also property owners with identified historic properties. And we kind of share a thank you for being great stewards of our historic districts. And that's a great time for us to share anything that's coming up. So this year, we took that opportunity to share with more than 1,300 people that we're updating our design guidelines, where they can go for more information, how they can reach us, et cetera. And also our Preservation Month schedule of events, which is upcoming, and that we're really excited about too. So please know that if you got the letter, that's really great. If you didn't get the letter and you want a copy, please let us know. But if you hear about this Preservation Month letter, if you hear about the letter that has the poppies on it, this is the letter that people are talking about. I'm really glad we got compliments. I want to go ahead and point out that one of our planning interns, Leah, designed that letter. And so we have really, really excellent planning interns right now who are doing great work. Y'all have seen a little bit of Shane Warren's work, the historic preservation intern. Leah's interning with long range planning. Leah Harc is a student at Southwestern University, and she has lent us her graphic design skills for historic preservation. And I'm so appreciative for that. So what we're going to be looking for from y'all, just so that you have an idea of what we're asking you to do in this process, we are going to send you a copy of the PDF directly via email next week. That email will go out from Myrna, and we are going to highlight some of the major proposed changes to help you navigate that document. Y'all know that design guidelines are not a really brief document. We do have a lot to cover. This isn't going to include a lot of pictures, so a lot of it's just going to be really pretty to look at, but we don't want you to get lost in the document or feel overwhelmed, so we're going to highlight some key changes for you in that email to give you some good navigation guidance. When we come back in your next regular meeting on May 13th, that's when we're going to be asking for your feedback. So we are going to put this document out next Wednesday, April 28th. We're going to have a virtual open house on Zoom and on Facebook Live from 3 to 4 p.m. on that date. We will post the PDF of the proposed update document to the project website, www.historic.georgetown.org. And then we're going to email it out to y'all to make that a little bit easier. And so people will be able to access that document, read it. We'll email it to people who need it emailed. We will print it for people who need it printed, however we can assist the public in engaging with that. People can call staff, they can email staff, they can come visit us. We'll be available for that. But we're asking you specifically for your feedback. And we want to kind of, in broad strokes, we want to know, are the proposed changes clear or is more information needed? i.e. is what you're seeing, I understand what this does, I understand what this is, or does staff need to assist with that? We're available to y'all one-on-one, so please don't feel like you have to wait until the meeting on the 13th in order to speak to staff if you've got questions. You can call us, you can email us. I am so happy to be available to y'all if y'all want to come stop by our office and meet in person if that's easier or more comfortable for you. Please just let me know so that I can make sure I set that time aside to meet with you and discuss. So we've got a couple of weeks to do that before your next meeting, but that's when we'll have another item to try to capture your feedback and get your questions, concerns. That is not the end all be all of the document. That's just, hey, did we get it right? Or are there some adjustments that are needed for this document? We've still got more process to go, but we are trying to capture those edits in that meeting on the 13th, because we need to get those back to our consultants so they can make those edits for us. And then when you look at the proposed changes, this is really an important tool for y'all's decision-making process on certificates of appropriateness. And so are the changes that we're providing, did those respond to the feedback that you gave us several months ago? And does that give you the tools that you need for decision-making? And so if we need to get into, hey, you know, we're saying yes to this thing, it looks like, I'm not sure I want to say yes to that. We'll take those very detailed comments, but we'll also love to understand generally, is this a tool that really helps you with the decision-making that you're asked to do as Harc commissioners? And so here's the first look. I'm going to cover in 3 different pieces. So we'll start with the fun part. We'll start with the format. You will see a new cover page. You're going to see new photos. One of the things that we were looking at is using actual pictures of Georgetown for our example photos instead of just general photos of places that we are not familiar with. And so this is a much more Georgetown focused document in terms of the photos that are provided, including cover images and things like that. Because this is a new document with a new consultant, we do have a different document style. So it's not a direct copy of what you're used to seeing. It is a different document style. And so we'll kind of go through what that looks like. The biggest surprise, the biggest change, but this is truly in response to the feedback that we received both from y'all and especially from our stakeholders and from the public. We've gone from 14 chapters down to 5. And so previously we've had a lot of the beginning chapters where like chapters 1 through 3 were actually non-regulatory content. They were informational. And then we started to get into project requirements in chapter 4. We covered bits and pieces for a long stretch. And then you may have noticed staff leans pretty heavily on chapters 12, 13, and 14. Those are basically the downtown area 1, downtown area 2, and Old Town overlay chapters. Those are where you get a lot of the content that you see in the staff reports shared with you from staff in our analysis. And so our consultant took those 3 chapters and kind of took the rest of that material and pushed it into those 3 chapters to simplify things. So rather than having design guidelines spread across maybe like 6 chapters for one project, you'll be able to find it in 1 chapter. And so if your project is in downtown area 1, those are the 9 blocks of the square, then you go to chapter 1. If your project is in area 2, the downtown that's outside of those 9 blocks of the square, then you go to chapter 2. If you're in Old Town, you go to chapter 3. If you're requesting a demolition, you go to chapter 4. And if you're requesting signage in any of the historic districts, you go to chapter 5. We didn't want to make people have to sort through a whole chapter for signage, so we left that out on its own. But really trying to simplify and streamline what the document looks like, because that was a way that we could help our users navigate it more successfully. And we just got a lot of comment from the public and from our stakeholders. Hey, this is just kind of confusing. And this is a way we're trying to make it a lot easier for everybody to navigate. So if that feels like, whoa, but where did all those guidelines go? we eliminated the duplications. So we might have the same or very, very similar guideline across 3 or 4 chapters. It might be in chapter 6, chapter, trying to think through chapters. It might be like chapter 6, chapter 9, and then chapter 14, you might kind of see the same thing. Well, now you're just going to see it applied in that one chapter, that one time. And so a lot of the duplicates being taken out kind of condensed the document a bit. And that was a really positive change. So it really helps with that navigation. And then there was a lot of content at the beginning of the document that we have either moved into the numbered guidelines where it was needed. We have pushed up into a preface so that it's clear this is not the regulatory piece. This is not the piece that you have to look at if you just want to know how do I do a project that meets all the requirements. But we need that good background information. So some of it got moved up to a preface and some of it got moved back to appendices. We have those great resources in the document still available, but we're trying to make a clear distinction between what are the rules and what is that good, helpful information for people who want that additional content. We, of course, had to make changes to the numbering and layout because we renumbered the chapters. And so here on the screen is kind of an example page of what you can expect to see. One of the things that I'm really excited about and really grateful for is we shortened the individual guidelines. And so it has happened before that when staff is writing the staff report, one guideline might have several bullet points. And sometimes it is so long that it can take up an entire page of the staff report to have just that one guideline with all of its bullet points. And all of the bullet points may or may not apply to the project. Some of them just wouldn't apply. And so it just gets to be a lot of text put into these staff reports that may not be directly applicable. And so Post Oak broke that up quite a bit more so we can get a little bit more tailored and a little bit more specific instead of having to just kind of say, well, 6.8 applies and we have to bring everything with 6.8. And this way we're able to kind of, instead of just a 6.8, there's kind of more refinement to that. And so that really kind of helps us from a staff report writing and a staff report reading standpoint. And then there was a little bit of a consistent organization that we thought would be helpful that Post Oak was proposing. They said, you know, we want to be consistent. We want to help people navigate this document. So we have these 3 main chapters. Area 1, Area 2, and Old Town, and those are all going to be organized in the same way. So they're going to start with the public realm, kind of the features that you see from the streetscape. Then we'll go to site design, and then we'll go to building design format. So kind of starting big picture and then narrowing in on the details. That way, if you're just doing the details, you can zoom down to those. If you're looking to build a completely new building and you kind of need that guidance on setting and context in site, you're going to have that available to you. But those are consistent across those 3 chapters, not needed quite as much for demolitions and for signage. Here's one of my favorite parts. So they have added details and definitions and descriptions and illustrations of the key architectural styles we have in Georgetown. So these are Georgetown specific. And they include pictures of our own buildings, sharing what those styles are. And so 2 really great things about that. One, it just really helps from an information and sharing with our community what the styles are and why they're so special in and of themselves, what their time periods are, when you can kind of expect those to have been constructed, and then kind of what those key features are. So you'll see, for example, on this Queen Anne, they often have asymmetrical facades. They might have steeply pitched roofs, overhanging eaves. And that really helps us to understand the individual structures better. And that transitions really well into when people want to propose additions to their structures, what makes for a good addition on one style of building may not make for the same good addition on a different style. So what you do on a Queen Anne Victorian and what you do on a mid-century ranch are probably 2 different things. And so giving us those definitions and details about the styles, pointing out those key features and characteristics really help us in evaluating what good additions look like, since we see a lot of requests for residential additions. This isn't limited to residential though. They've also provided that information for commercial buildings in our downtown. And some of it was really even kind of in that cursory review really helpful to me to understand a little bit better some of the base styles of our downtown buildings, because we have kind of our own local version of it, but understanding where that base style started has been, I think, a really great thing for me to see. And I'm really glad that we're going to have that additional content included. So as we get into new requirements, we're not going to cover everything tonight. That's a longer meeting than anybody wants to have. We will, again, if y'all want to talk to staff one-on-one, if you want to do a real deep dive on this, please do that. We just want to give you a few key highlights so that you know what you're going to be seeing when you see this document next week. And so when we look at our downtown and the requirements, so these kind of numbers and bullet points that you see in the staff report, when we say complies, partially complies, does not comply, those are the pieces that we're looking at here. Some of the things that we're not changing about the downtown requirements, because this isn't a complete overhaul, it's just trying to make sure these are the best that we can do to fit our needs. And so we're not proposing to change that kind of building module articulation that we've got expressed right now. We want our buildings to have these kind of live well with traditional buildings. They didn't tend to be in our downtown, especially, they didn't tend to be these whole block buildings. They tended to be a little bit kind of narrower storefronts. And so we're not looking to change kind of that guidance. We're not really looking to change the guidance on site design, not looking to change really that content on what it looks like to protect and retain historic structures. We're still going to have that content that says, here's how you should treat storefronts. Here's how you should treat wood windows. Here's how you should treat cornices and historic canopies and brick and limestone and things like that. So that'll all still be there. We're not really looking to change how we talk about commercial additions and give guidance for those. So a lot in area 1 is actually not really changing that much, with a key exception. One of the things that council wanted us to look at is commercial infill. And how could that be improved? So based on council's direction to look at commercial infill, looking at y'all's feedback that you provided to Post Oak, looking at our stakeholder feedback and what we were hearing consistently, especially materials. We really focused a lot on materials and material quality and the importance of that for new buildings. And so there's going to be some guidance for things that are kind of in the public realm, kind of along the pedestrian routes, canopies, lighting, things like that. Not a lot of new regulations, just being a little bit more clear on what that looks like to be successful. But when we look at infill building design too, they're really highlighting these aspects of our historic buildings that can be picked up in new buildings. It can be done in a new way, but in a way that also really well reflects the historic context. So they've described buildings as having a base, a middle, and a cap. 3 different pieces. So you have kind of the ground floor level, and then you have a middle level. On a single story building, that's probably kind of the blank part where a sign goes. And then you have the cap, or like the cornice, or the part that separates the building from the sky. There's usually kind of this defining line in historic buildings. In our downtown, we've got some really beautiful pressed metal cornices. They add a lot of dimension to building facades. And so one of the things that we were hearing pretty consistently, not only from y'all, but from our stakeholders, is a focus on the materials and how could we do new buildings with materials in a way that really helped us to reflect the things that we love about our historic structures. And so what Post Oak came back with was defining what human scale means, which I thought was really great and really successful. We have been using the term human scale in our design guidelines and really struggled with, but what does that mean? They're describing it as, you can tell the materials were hand hewn and also like hand built. So you don't get like really oversized pieces of stone. You don't get really oversized walls with like no breaks and no reveals and no definition, because everything had to be constructed by hand in our historic districts for these historic structures. And so we want new buildings to reflect a lot of those qualities in the materials. They've got a beautiful way of describing it, and we'll be sure to highlight that when we send out that email. But we also, in talking about materials, they were able to highlight some things that they think are going to be a really successful way for us to understand how things can have really good outcomes. And so one of the focuses was on windows and being more clear with guidance on what the proportions of upper floor windows should be. They're vertically oriented, they're taller than they are wide. Upper floor windows kind of looking like real windows instead of just one single fixed piece of glass, because that reflects kind of our traditional building elements that are part of our perception of our downtown. And then setting those windows back a little bit deeper in the wall versus having them right at the face of the building, it creates a shadow and a depth that helps to add dimension to building facades. So some of the concern that we heard was things were looking kind of flat, not as dimensional, and just really struggling with why aren't things kind of quite looking the way that we would like them to. And Post Oak shared that it maybe wasn't just the materials, it was also the way that materials and building elements could be designed to add visual depth and three-dimensionality. And so we're really excited to have that. They also provided some additional guidance on building proportions, which I think get at some of the feedback that y'all were sharing related to building massing and how you evaluate that. So I think we've got some improvements to share with y'all there. In area 2, there's going to be a lot of similarities because area 2 is still the downtown overlay district. Area 2 still has historic structures. What we know about area 2 though, and I've tried to highlight a little bit in the photo that you see on the right, that's the area around the intersection of, it's kind of just to the west and north of the intersection of University Avenue and Austin Avenue. That's an area where we still have a lot of residential structures, even though they're in the downtown overlay district. And so one of the things that y'all had brought up as a real concern, and we know this is kind of an ongoing challenge, is how do we treat transition areas? How do we treat areas that historically were residential? They may have converted to commercial buildings and commercial uses, or they may have residential buildings and commercial uses, or they may still have residential buildings and residential uses. People may use those as their home still. And so how do we more successfully navigate those transitions of building types and building uses, especially along the edges of the downtown? And so what Post Oak is proposing is to address this by bringing in an element of our downtown master plan. We don't use our downtown master plan a lot in Harc. We use it a lot when there's a rezoning request because it's part of our comprehensive plan. And so that's where you'll see the downtown master plan used more in rezonings than you will in certificates of appropriateness. But it was a great element for us to draw in for the design guidelines because the downtown master plan describes 4 different character areas. It acknowledges that our downtown is not one single kind of homogeneous thing, but it's really got a lot of variety in it, and it has a lot to do with how it's developed and evolved over time. So what Post Oak is proposing is that we kind of take that a step further and in the design guidelines, give guidance that identifies some of these streets are kind of this urban commercial in character. You would expect the building to be built right up to the front property line. There's a sidewalk right there at the front door. People are walking by, looking into the windows. That's what we tend to see more of in the downtown and the couple of blocks surrounding it. But as we get further out, we're seeing this urban residential context. The houses and the lots might be a little bit closer together, a little bit more dense, a little bit more compact, but they're still set back from the street. They're still set back from the front property line. There's usually a front yard or something like that. And so when we get a request for infill, brand new construction, brand new buildings, how those brand new buildings sit and fit within those contexts is really important. And so we wanted to give more guidance specifically in the design guidelines to help say, hey, you might have a type of zoning category that allows you to build right up to the front property line, but all of the surrounding structures are maybe not built like that. And so it's really important to help maintain this historic character that the new building coming in respects the way that the other buildings are either set back from the street or set back from each other, and helps to have those good relationships with the neighboring buildings. And so this is a way that we're looking to kind of introduce that concept That's something that we'll highlight for you in that email where that's located and get your feedback on. We're planning to have some maps to be a little bit more clear about that. And so to just try to be really clear about what the expectations are. It is a little bit of a shift. It's probably one of our biggest changes. So we wanted to make sure that we highlighted it here. Okay, moving on to residential. So we're looking to keep some of the current content. Again, this isn't a complete overhaul. We are keeping some of what we already have that's working really well. We do currently have guidance on landscaping. It's not what we review as part of a COA, but one of the things that we were balancing is sometimes people are looking for information, but we don't necessarily need to regulate it through an application process. This kind of keeping some of those landscape elements and things like that helps to provide some guidance, even if we're not going to necessarily like apply it every time. And so we didn't really take that out, if you will. We kind of left that in there. We left the guidance that was consistent with the Secretary of the Interior standards. Good preservation guidance is good preservation guidance. And so we kind of left the things that talk about preserving, repairing materials rather than replacing, taking care of historic structures. There weren't a whole lot of changes to that. But when we look at residential infill and additions, new construction that y'all see quite a bit of, we're providing additional guidance according to the architectural style for additions, which I think is a good improvement. We're also for new construction and large additions both, looking more closely on the relationship to neighboring structures. So there have been some concerns about, well, what if that new house really kind of looms over its neighbors? What if it kind of like overwhelms and looks down? Or what if that new addition also kind of looms over its neighbors? They've included some guidance to help address some of those concerns. And again, to just share that new construction needs to live really happily with its surroundings and not be too disruptive. In materials, we're looking to clarify, add some more guidance and looking to clarify areas that replacement materials will be good, acceptable replacements, and where some things won't work. So vinyl siding, aluminum siding, still a no-no. Those are things that tend to just not have the same look and feel, especially for buildings that were originally constructed of wood. But where a fiber cement product might provide a very similar, the same profile to a wood profile, and when painted, it's very hard to tell the difference. That's where some of those replacement materials would be more successful. We're just laying that out more clearly. That was part of council's direction on in-kind materials, is giving a little bit better direction and information about what people can use in terms of alternates. And being also a little bit sensitive to some of the cost concerns. And so for windows too, if you do need to have replacement windows, they still need to have these stylistic characteristics that are appropriate to the house. They still need to have materials that can be clearly understood as like more compatible, you know, kind of DIY windows from people who are not kind of experienced in the trade, maybe not as good, but where people might need to do a window replacement, they'll have some options while needing to use a clear glass because that's consistent with historic glazing, and then also using kind of some stylistic features. We're used to seeing sometimes multi-pane windows, or we might see a 1/1 window. And so keeping in character with the structure is still going to be required, even if you do have that replacement opportunity. Looking to basically require porches on just about all new infill construction. There might be so if you wanted to do like a modern ranch style, ranches didn't always have big front porches. So maybe in an instance like that, it wouldn't be the right fit. But for a lot of the styles that we're seeing for residential infill, a front porch is a great fit. We want to make sure that we have those included in the design because it's part of retaining that historic character of these neighborhoods and building that really good streetscape that we enjoy. And then a little more clarification on fences. Y'all may have noticed in the staff reports, we currently only have one single guideline for fences, and it doesn't quite cover the different kinds of requests that y'all get. And so we wanted to add a little bit more content there. For demolition and relocation, we're not proposing to change the UDC as part of this design guideline update. And so the approval criteria in the UDC are not kind of changing with this. But what we want to do is give more clarity and guidance, especially for y'all. If you do find that you want to do approval of a demo or relocation with conditions, then just really assisting in those conditions, if it's salvage, if it's archived documents, and what that looks like, when that's a good choice, when that's a good tool to implement, and what those expectations would be. So we're just trying to fill out kind of some of that information that the UDC does not make specific. So this is a way for us to supplement what those UDC requirements are. And then for signs, so we just had a discussion on signage, and that rolls really well into, we are updating our design guidelines for signs. So now is the time. One of the things that we are keeping is the size limits based on the building facade length. So you're probably familiar with and pretty accustomed to, for every 1 foot of building facade length, you can have 1 square foot of sign. So if your building is 20 feet wide, you can have a 20-foot square sign. If you have a building that's 100 feet wide, you can have a 100 square foot sign. And so the whole goal is to have signs in proportion to the building facades. So we're not planning to change any of the calculations like that. What we are looking to do is to clarify more specifically in those numbered requirements that it's just 1 primary sign that's allowed per business, per building. And then looking to limit the total number of signs per business to 3. So rather than being able to have 5 different kinds of signs, which our guidelines are not completely clear on at the moment, this is something that we have an opportunity to improve, limiting the total number of signs to 3. So you might be able to have a facade sign or a canopy sign, and then like a little hanging sign under the canopy and a window sign. But not all of that, not a facade sign and a canopy sign and window signs and an under canopy hanging sign and a blade sign and a little A-frame sign on the sidewalk. Too much sign. We know that people want to make sure their customers, potential and current customers know where their business is and what they offer, but we don't want so much signage that we're no longer able to see and enjoy the beautiful architecture that we have in our downtown. So looking to just really be clear about limiting the number of total signs. And then we're addressing illumination styles more clearly. That was something that really came up in the stakeholder comments too, is we need more specific, clear guidance on what y'all's expectations are. And then providing size and location kind of guidance for signs for upper floor businesses. That's something that we have a little bit of a challenge for, because the ground floor guys like to take up all the signage space, and then it can leave questions about, well, where does a sign go for an upper floor business, and what would work well for them, and how do you make sure these signs don't compete with each other? So looking to include that as well. I want to reiterate right here that the way our UDC is set up, the way our development code is set up, design guidelines have laid out what kind of signs can be approved by staff. And so the UDC says if it meets the UDC requirements and it meets all of the applicable design guidelines, the sign COA does not have to go to Harc for approval. It can be approved by staff. So staff, as long as it meets those requirements, you can do that administratively. What we saw tonight is an example, and y'all have seen this before. If it doesn't meet the design guidelines, it doesn't mean that it can't be approved. It just means that staff does not have the ability to make that approval. It goes to Harc for that approval. And so when we look at signs and what's required, we also want to balance that a bit with how the UDC sets up approvals, and just acknowledge that we do have a list of prohibited signs. So that will be clear. It's at the very end of the sign chapter. We put in a whole list of here are the signs that you can't have. But there is going to be still that flexibility where when people have a really good design solution for a sign, but it doesn't quite meet the design guidelines, staff still doesn't have that opportunity just because it's a good sign. We have to stay within what we've been given the authority to do. Harc has that broader authority, and that's why signs would still continue to come to y'all if it didn't kind of more strictly meet those design guidelines. And so as I kind of transition into closing out my presentation, and thank y'all so much for hanging in with us through this long meeting. Here's what y'all can expect to see next. So we're going to have that virtual open house Wednesday, April 28th from 3 to 4 p.m. That'll be on Zoom, like your meetings. And then it'll also be on the City of Georgetown Facebook as a Facebook Live event. So you can watch on Facebook, or you can also watch via the Zoom meeting link. You can see that on the front page of historic.georgetown.org. So it'll give a meeting link as well as a call-in number you can join. If you're not able to join live, don't worry, we're going to record the meeting and then we'll post that video as soon as we can get it downloaded. And so that meeting invite will be replaced with the meeting recording once that's complete. So you'll be able to watch later on if you'd like to. And also just please feel free to reach out and contact staff and we'll be happy to assist. We're going to have a public comment period from April 28th to May 14th on this draft. It's not the last chance for public comment. It's just, these are the edits that we need to collect to get to our consultant so that they can get those incorporated and get us kind of the final draft of the document. We're going to come back with the meeting on the 13th and ask for your feedback and kind of go through a process with that. So everybody eat your dinner early. And then we're going to have a city council workshop on May 25th. What we're going to do with council is recap what we've done so far. We will present the proposed changes to the design guidelines along with the feedback that we received, not only from y'all, but from our stakeholders, from the public. We'll combine all of that together and share with council our recommendation and say, here's what we've heard, here's what we think that looks like, and then ask them to confirm the direction that we're going. The reason that that's important is because when council gives us their feedback and hopefully their blessing, then we'll start the process of adoption. And so getting ready to make this formal and make this official in June and July. So we have a little bit of summer work coming up. So if people want to be involved, if they want to give their feedback, if they want to review the document, they want to talk to staff, they want to talk to their neighbors, they want to talk to y'all, we are going to have that virtual open house April 28th. And then we'll have that posted so people can watch after the fact. They can send it to their friends, their neighbors, their family. We're going to have a participant survey with that so to make it a little bit easier for people to get staff follow-up if that's helpful. And then we're also going to be engaged in direct communication. We're emailing y'all, but we're also directly communicating back with our stakeholder groups, the people who met with us and kind of our frequent flyers, if you will, people who are familiar with this process and see it a lot or are subject to it a lot. We're going to get their feedback and ask them for their input and say, did we get it right? You told us what was working well and what wasn't working so well. Here we are. And is this going to work for you? Give people the chance to comment. We'll also go back to city staff with that. And then we'll go to the Main Street Advisory Board, Preservation Georgetown, and do that outreach. We're going to use social media. We're going to use news releases. You may have seen this in the Williamson County Sun already. We're going to use the Tuesday Talks presentation. We're going to use Main Street Breakfast Bites. And so as we do that, if we're happy to take that feedback now, but also as you think about it, is there anybody else that we need to reach out to? Is there anybody that you think, oh, hey, staff, I think you missed this person or you missed this group, or I don't think we're reaching out to this organization we need to reach out to? If y'all would let us know, we'd be glad to take that. And then just to recap so that everybody knows what to expect early in the summer, y'all will hold, once we're ready, we have that final draft. It's like, okay, guys, this is the one that we're considering living with for a while. Y'all are going to hold a public hearing and make a recommendation to the city council. And so if you were part of our recent rezoning request, that was one where you didn't make a final decision. You made a recommendation of approval or disapproval. So this will be similar to that. You're going to make a recommendation of approval or disapproval of the proposed kind of final draft of this document, or approval with conditions maybe. And so we'll work through that when we get to that meeting. We're anticipating that to be your second meeting in June right now. And so this is part of your designated role by council, is to make that recommendation on formulating design guidelines and other supplemental materials written right there in the UDC. Council would then hold two meetings. So they'll hold a public hearing and first reading. And so they'll have a public hearing where people can speak and give their input, positive or negative, or whatever people want to share with the council. And then they'll vote on that first reading. And then they'll hold a second reading in the following meeting. We're expecting this to be the 2 meetings in July right now. So first reading, public hearing, first meeting in July, second reading, second meeting in July. You have to do that for ordinances according to our city charter. And so when they vote on that second reading, that'll be the final vote. And so we'll be busy preparing that ordinance. Y'all will be able to see a copy of that ordinance. We can share that information with you. That'll be posted publicly, but there's the design guidelines document, and then there's an ordinance for adoption that goes with it. That's the legal document that kind of gets it made official. And so lots of fun paperwork to be doing. In total, there's going to be 3 public meetings and 2 public hearings as part of that adoption process when we kind of get very formal with this. So I know that was a lot of information. Thank you all so much. I'm happy to answer questions, and Nat's happy to answer questions if we can assist. If y'all want some time to think about it and digest, again, we are happy to be available to y'all for this over the next several weeks. Always happy to be available, but particularly as we kind of go, we really get into this process and really start putting a lot of focus on it.
Thank you, Britton. I have a question immediately. When we were provided this document, it was printed and, you know, bound in a spiral binding. How do you deliver this to people who need it, people who are applying? Is it always in hard copy, or will you be sending it out electronically?
For the most part, we're going to be sending this out electronically, but if anybody needs a printed copy, I am happy to make that happen. And so we'll probably be printing it at our office kind of on demand, but we're happy to do that. So normally what we would do is, and when I say normally, I mean non-COVID times, we probably would have had the open house at the library, and it probably would have been an event that we would have scheduled from 4 to 7 p.m. It actually probably would have been on a Wednesday. And we would invite people to come. We would give presentations probably on the hour. We would have kind of some posters with key summaries. We'd get all the planning staff together to go help and answer questions and be available to talk to people. And then we would have copies available for people, hard copies that they could take home. We've really shifted a lot into a virtual environment, not only with our meetings, but with our communication. And so we have seen kind of less demand for in-person and hard copy paper, but it still does exist. And it's still very important to us when people have that need for us to meet that need. So if we can email a copy to you and that works for you, we're happy to do that. If you or somebody that you know needs a hard copy and you need it delivered even, just please let us know and we'd be happy to accommodate that request. We're here for it.
No, I'm getting at a much more basic issue is once it's all done and it's final and people come in and they want to apply, you're going to provide them all an electronic copy. So at the very beginning of this process, I asked if it was going to be indexed, tagged, and searchable electronically. You know,
Right.
how yeah, the document itself.
So we made that request. I'm not sure if this draft is going to be that way, but it's part of the plan.
Okay.
I don't know that this, you know, I had not checked with Post Oak on that. So I don't know if this draft is going to be, because it's not the final copy. It's the one we're going to edit. And so we might not get that until kind of the final version of it that gets posted online and things like that.
Exactly. Okay. That was one question. And I think the cover looks great. The pictures look great. There is an issue though with some of their printing and shading, which would not be considered ADA compliant and very difficult for people with low vision to see because of the contrast. So, you know, black type on white is easy to read. So that's the bulk of the inside. But if you went back to your table of contents page, you'll see what I mean, or I'll just point it out. And that will be the end of my comments. So if you look at the table of contents, you can see it's this sort of pale gray background. And then chapter 1 is an even paler gray on top of a gray. And downtown guidelines is a bolded sort of gray-green on top of gray. The paler it is and the same tone of color that it is, it does not have contrast. So it's very difficult for people with low vision to read something like that.
That is exactly the kind of good feedback we are looking for. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Britton. Thank you, Catherine. Any other comments or questions? Okay. Well, this has been a lengthy process that y'all have undergone over the last year. I'm glad to see it, coming together so beautifully. I think it will serve the commission and our city well. So thank you for all your work on that. Okay, so anything else, Britton or staff, before we adjourn? Okay. All right, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Okay. Do I have a second?
So seconded.
Okay, let's vote. Motion to adjourn, Commissioner Parr, approve. Commissioner Nunn,
Approve.
Commissioner Morales,
Approve.
Commissioner Hyde,
Approve.
Commissioner Walton,
Approve.
and Commissioner Curry.
Approve.
Okay, that motion carries. Thank y'all very much. Y'all have a wonderful evening and we'll see you in a few weeks.
Bye.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.